Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad to see you all here. My name is Aaron Houghton, and I'm the creator of Founders First, where founders thrive. We are happy to kick off another Founders Forum discussion. This is actually our 12th forum, and well, it's our last one of the year. We're excited to bring you more great discussions starting again in January. For today's forum, we are very fortunate to be joined by Karl Shallowhorn. Karl, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks for having me.
First, let me tell everyone a little bit about Karl. Karl is a mental health advocate, an educator, a speaker, and a coach. He's worked professionally for over 28 years in the fields of addiction counseling, mental health advocacy, higher education, and leadership development and coaching. He's given over 200 trainings on mental health and addiction-related topics and is a certified mental health first aid instructor as well. Karl is the author of Working on Wellness, A Practical Guide to Mental Health, as well as Leadership Through the Lens of the 12 Steps, and the accompanying mastermind course, which he's created as well. He's received awards for his work on mental health from the National Federation of Just Communities, the Buffalo Association of Black Social Workers, and others. And his presentation, African American Men and Mental Health, Crisis or Opportunity, will be featured at TEDx Buffalo coming up in 2021. One thing I really appreciate and respect about Karl is how open he is about his own long-term recovery from bipolar and co-occurring addiction disorder. He has a clearly demonstrated passion for eliminating the stigma associated with mental illness and helping people discover their unmet potential as well, a cause that is really near and dear to me, as you all know as well. So we are excited that he's here. So our guests understand how this discussion will go today. I'm going to ask Karl a number of questions about his experience and his work. Then I'll open it up to questions from the audience. So if you have a question, please put it in the chat section here in Zoom, and we'll pose it to Karl when we get there later in the conversation. So feel free to drop it in whenever it pops into your mind. I will call for them again later, so you won't miss out on the opportunity to ask your question. Again, just drop it in the chat whenever it comes up. So Karl, you've had a pretty amazing journey. You've spent many years as a clinician and with mental health organizations, and you're very open about some of the struggles that have informed your ability to talk about these subjects from experience. I think some background on your own mental health experience will really resonate with some of our members. So if you could tell us a little bit about your own mental health journey.
Sure. Well, basically, Aaron, my journey began when I was a college freshman in Flint, Michigan in 1981. I was a freshman at General Motors Institute. It's now called Kettering University Engineering School. And I, like some other people, went to college for the wrong reason, or at least went to the college that I didn't want to go to in the first place, but I went to it because I think my parents wanted me to go there. Mm-hmm. And anyway, so I found myself in the midst of an environment where there was an extremely rigorous academic curriculum. I was away from home for the first time. I'm also adopted and only child. I began using drugs and alcohol, and all that kind of came through to be a perfect storm where I had a major psychotic episode where I was catatonic in my dormitory room, and that was in February of 1981. And from there, I was brought back home to Buffalo, and I spent basically the next 7 or so years going in and out of hospitals, all kinds of medical treatments, you can imagine, all kinds of medications, even honestly, electroconvulsive therapy. It was really rough for a number of years. Despite that, I still graduated from college, and I attribute that a lot to my mother, who was actually a rehabilitation counselor herself, but was really old school. I mean, she never let up. So I graduated from college. I got a job at a local recording studio because my dream was to work in radio. I was a broadcasting major undergrad. And but then again, I eventually got into 12-step recovery, and I discovered that in 1988, and I got clean. I've been clean ever since. And shortly thereafter, I decided to become a counselor. And I said, because I want to help people. That was my goal, was just to help people like I'd been helped. So I got into the field of addiction counseling. At the same time, I met my wife. And so we got married. In about a year or so, roughly before our first child was born, I had another psychotic episode. I had another manic episode. And I had to take 3 months off of work. And that was extremely difficult. But I managed to get myself back on my feet. And from there, I worked. I eventually changed professions. I went to higher education for 12 years after I got my master's degree in student personal administration. And for there, I really began to kind of find a life that was more stable. And I really began to get into other passions. I got into running, really got actively into running and exercise. which helped a lot with my mental and emotional state as well as my physical, health. But then right around 2008, I began to get this feeling of why, well, first I wanted to share my story of recovery,
Mhm.
but also why we don't hear more positive stories about people with mental health conditions in the media. That was all around the time when Britney Spears was all over the news, if you remember that.
Mhm.
And so I wrote an article that was in the Buffalo News, Buffalo, our local paper here, and I kind of outed myself. And I was working at a very small private college where nobody knew about my condition, and it was a huge risk. As a result of that, I began to do some work for a small, actually relatively large size behavioral health provider. But I did a group, I called it Work on Wellness. That's where I got the idea for the book from. And I did a per diem 1 hour a week group with them. I began to do some speaking with the National Alliance of Mental Illness and other groups. And I just really began to become empowered by sharing my story to others. Eventually, I had a conversation with the VP at the college where she said to me, Karl, if this isn't your passion, you need to find out what it is. The true story behind that is also she was writing me up. And a long time it took me to admit that in public, but she brought me in one day saying that, questioning my work performance, I think. But the bottom line is, I think she was concerned about me being a liability considering my mental health condition. Even though I'd never had any problems, my work performance was fine. I was, I was producing the numbers and doing other things. I traveled to China twice
Mhm.
for them. So on all accounts, things were well, but I think she found me to be a liability.
Mhm.
Well, I walked out of that office after signing that document. I called the organization Horizon Health Services. And with 2 weeks, I was working there. Luckily, like I said, I had a credential for addiction counseling
Mhm.
previously that I re-engaged with. And that's really where it took off with me working in the behavioral health field. I began to work in advocacy after that job, and then got into more things just like I've been doing recently, like mental health first aid instructing. Overseeing a federal grant for mental first aid currently,
Mhm.
and also just doing some other projects, getting into, like you mentioned, the leadership development coaching. I'm also doing life coaching,
Mhm.
doing life coaching with a emphasis on mental health. So all my work is kind of like led up to where I'm at today at this moment. And I find to be very excited. Even though we're in really tough times, I feel that the future's bright, not just for me, but for a lot of people. If you
Mhm.
really look at from having the proper mindset, I think it's what a lot of it comes down to.
Yeah, and that bravery to come out with this thing that you're hiding about, well, not hiding, but this thing that we don't, like, many of these things we don't share with the public, right, about ourselves, and these challenges, many of them being mental health challenges for us. So for everybody listening, think about the bravery it takes to, whatever is maybe your deepest darkest secret, going public with that. And at the time you were working for an organization, right? And going public with that inside of an organization, I think that's this incredible bravery to be able to come out and share a challenge like that with the world. We'll come back to kind of how that, being able to talk about it changed, may have changed your life going forward. One of the things that I love, the fact that you've got this amazing experience that you can speak from now, right? So both for all the great work you've done in mental health, but as a new entrepreneur, actually yourself, this year, you started your business in April. Again, what an incredible time, what an incredibly weird,
Good
strange,
timing.
difficult time to start a business. I'm sure there's folks on this call as well that started companies this year. Of course, starting a business in the time of COVID is a massive challenge, but your own life journey has brought you to a level of self-awareness that most first-time founders just don't have. So we all have different struggles. Sometimes the things we can learn from them are surprisingly similar. So my question for you is, um, what have your challenges taught you about yourself, about how you need to manage yourself, your time? You mentioned a couple of things there, kind of exercise and some reliable schedule. So what about your time, your environment? What advice do you provide to those that you teach who are having these similar struggles?
Well, your first question you asked, what have I learned about myself? I learned that I'm incredibly resilient.
Hmm.
And everyone has this capacity to be resilient. Sometimes you have to build resilience through using your tools and using what's available to you. Resilience can also come from adversity. So obviously you heard a little bit of my story. There's obviously a lot more to it than that, but I've been through so much in my life that now, not to say that things just roll off me, I experience stress like everyone else, but I've
Hmm.
learned to develop the capacity to handle these things and keep moving forward.
Hmm.
So one way that I've been able to do this is I have a great support system. And I think my wife, of course, first and foremost, is my main partner in crimes. They say she's the one who keeps me accountable. She
Hmm.
grounds me. And I also have two wonderful adult daughters who are great. And so the support system is important. Just also my 12-step program that I still follow is very helpful. And then as far as the way I organize my time, it's interesting going from working as a full-time staff person, employee, to now operating on my own terms with my time. Of course, like many entrepreneurs, I find myself working more. Working more. I mean, it's not a 9 to 5. It's working all times a day. It's sometimes I'll be thinking of something at 10 o'clock at night as I'm getting ready for bed. I'll put a note in my phone, right? So my mind is always thinking about work, but I also have learned to take breaks. In other words, I know that the mind, the body can't go 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
So I make sure I get sleep. Example is that yesterday I was beat. I was just exhausted. I think I fell asleep by 9 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately, since I'm in business for myself, I woke up this morning about 8:30 and got ready for my day. I literally slept almost 12 hours,
Mm-hmm.
but I needed it. So that's another thing. I'm also in therapy.
Mm-hmm.
I saw my therapist this morning, and so I do that. And also another one with that, as far as my work environment, I have an office here at work, at home rather, I should say, that I work out of. I've got all the tools here that I need. I'm very fortunate. I'm privileged in that respect. Not everyone has these things.
Mm-hmm.
My wife works at home too. She has her office. So we've kind of commandeered our daughter's spaces that they moved out of this past summer to kind of have these things.
Mm-hmm.
But just having a space to work in has been very helpful for me to be able to separate, like you say, the space that I work in, because it does make a difference. When I'm here, I'm able to focus. I'm able to do the job at hand. And then when I'm done, I go to other parts of the house. I'm a huge music lover. I listen to music. I have vinyl records. I do things like that. So a lot of it has to do with boundaries between work and just taking time off to relax. I have some Netflix type shows I watch. I love comedy. So I take the time for myself too. I think it's very important that self-care piece is critical. So those are things that I try to do.
Yeah. So once we've learned these lessons that you're just talking about, or once we know ourselves better, maybe we don't like what we see, right? This introspection sometimes leads us to places that we don't want to actually admit are there. Maybe we wish we were stronger, more resilient, or more confident. One of the things you frequently talk about is the idea of perseverance. You just mentioned it, like all the challenges that you've had along the way, which may be even harder once we admit we're struggling. What habits do you incorporate into your routine? Like, is there any, you talked about a bunch of tools you pull in, but is there a defined structure to your day, or what steps do you take on a regular basis to focus on just persevering? How do we do it as entrepreneurs? How do we get through it?
That's a good question. And I don't know, the best way I can answer that is I think in some respects, at least for me, it's an inherent quality
Mm-hmm.
that I've developed over time. I've run 2 marathons. And when I was 55, I did a 102-mile ride, charity ride.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, how to say the average, I rode at 17 miles an hour. Not to brag, but for a 55-year-old guy, that's not bad. Including the fact that in the last 12 miles, I was experiencing major leg cramps. My foot was coming out of my pedal, but I was determined to finish the ride.
Incredible.
And there was even to the point where my riding partner said, "You can stop. The SAG vehicle's coming up. They could have picked my bike up, thrown me in there, and took me to the finish." I said, "No, I got to finish." So I don't know. I think that's the kind of person I am. I don't give up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't give up. And I think for what I've learned in life, that ability to say I'm not going to give up goes a long way.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we're in tough times right now, and I know a lot of people feel like giving up. I know business ventures don't always go the way they're supposed to. Sometimes you do have to pivot and shift gears and go in a different direction.
Mm-hmm.
But the way I look at it, I have to exhaust all my resources to determine if that's the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I'm going full steam ahead. I have to believe myself. I have to believe that I can be successful. Otherwise, what's the point? I'm also a believer that what we give, we get. With the energy we put out, it's the energy things we get back in return.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I try to take that sense of positivity and use it to almost, in a sense, I could say almost visualize where I want to be,
Mm-hmm.
whether it be through meditation or other means, and try to bring that into realization. And some people say that's hokey business and whatever, but I believe that works.
Hmm.
That's how you mentioned the TED Talk. When I heard about the program in Buffalo, I thought about applying. After I applied, I would meditate and I would see myself in that TED Talk stage.
Hmm.
And then I got the call on Father's Day when I was having dinner with my wife and daughters. It was a cool moment. I yelled and they knew what it was right away. So it is possible to persevere. It is possible to discover what you need to do, and not to give up on yourself, because sometimes we forget what we have the ability to do. I think that every person has the ability to go further than they think they can,
Hmm.
and what their potential is.
One of the themes you touch on often is this idea of tribe. You already mentioned relationships that are so important to you now. We all need a tribe. I love this theme because it's so much of what we're doing here at Founders First and the Founders First community among entrepreneurs. You've said that as entrepreneurs, we have a tribe for our business, but we also need one for ourselves personally,
Yeah.
so we won't be going it alone. You mentioned one member of your tribe is an old friend and business owner, you told me the other day, who you run ideas by. Talk to us a little bit about that idea of tribe. Like, what is it? What does it provide? And why is it important for entrepreneurs?
So for me, it goes back to my origins of starting in my 12-step program.
Hmm.
When I joined it was actually January 17th, 1988. I remember the day like it was yesterday. And when I walked into that room, I felt like I belonged. And I never belonged anywhere before. I mean, I was part of a drug culture. I was mentally ill, so to speak. But when I walked through those doors, I realized there were people like me who weren't afraid to share their struggles and be open to be vulnerable with each other. And that meant so much to me that I fell right into it. And I also realized the importance of relationships in our lives.
Hmm.
So my friends in the program, primarily men, because the way I come from in the program, a lot of times they say men with the men, women with the women. Well, I think we know why they say that. But most of my friends in the program, my close friends, are men. But the funny thing is, in our society, men oftentimes don't let their guard down in any area, whether it
Hmm.
be with other men or their families or whoever. But I have friends who I can be very open with and be comfortable with sharing about all kinds of things,
Hmm.
things that I would probably never mention to anybody else.
Hmm.
But it's the fact that we're in it together, and it's mutual support. In other words, 12-step programs are really mutual support programs, they're called, where you get help from each other. Whether it be times of crisis or times of celebration.
Hmm.
And I've been around for 32 years. And in fact, an offshoot of that is my vinyl group. I talked about me being into vinyl records.
Hmm.
So about 26 or so years ago, one of my friends, Tim, who I worked with as a counselor at the first counseling job I had, we discovered we had a mutual interest in music. And then I had another friend who was a housemate of mine when I went to Buffalo State in 1984. So I said to Tim, and James independently, I said, we should get together and listen to music. Because honestly, when you're in college and all that, what did you do? Well, I know what I did. I sat around getting high, listening to music with my friends. I said, let's do that without getting high. And so we started doing that in 1994. We still do it today.
Wow.
Now we're doing it now through Zoom.
That's
And in fact, when the COVID hit, we had to make that adjustment. Well, we did. I've got the Zoom account. We started doing it immediately. In fact, my friend Tim had a major prostate scare. He had to have surgery. He has COVID. He got COVID about maybe a month ago.
mm.
And we've been doing some Zoom. We call each other every day. And I'll tell you something, Aaron. I lost my dad several years ago. I lost my mom in 1996. We need people that like this in our lives to help us when we're struggling. Because no one gets through this thing alone. I don't care who you are, how strong you think you are, we all need help in life. And sometimes we need to ask for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for myself, despite the fact that, all those years in school where I didn't want to raise my hand to ask questions, I undoubtedly ask questions now because, first of all, why waste all that time trying to figure out the answer yourself if you could just ask someone? But sometimes we just need to humble ourselves and, use a little humility to say, hey, help a brother out here, right? I need your help with this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you get your answers. So I've learned the whole tribe concept is something that has kept me going. And like I said, I really, really believe in. And so I know for a lot of reasons that having people in my life as supports has been invaluable. And my friend, like you said, my business friend, is also in the 12-step program like myself.
Mm-hmm.
And when I just started this venture, I asked him to be said, quote unquote, my business sponsor. He's a successful businessman. He's a $1 million business, contractor. And in fact, he teaches me a lot. He helps me keep things in perspective. I begin to freak out and think, oh, this isn't going to work. He grounds me.
Mm-hmm.
So he guides me. And we always need that. We could use that too. He's like a mentor, basically. I call it business sponsor. He's like a mentor. Mm-hmm. And so with that, I just know that's another thing about having a tribe is sometimes you have certain people in that tribe specifically to help you in certain areas of your life.
Yeah, I love the concept of a business sponsor. And it makes me think about, like, everyone on this call, each of us as founders, as entrepreneurs, is there someone that we've appointed to be, and have they agreed to be appointed as the person who's in charge of looking out for us to make sure that we're okay, right? We often surround ourselves with these business advisors or investors or, people that are smart in our industry or people that are connected or people that are well networked and all those other things we look for, those tactical business skills. But is there somebody that's looking out for us personally that can say, and we hear this in our sessions with the Peakability group all the time where, often it's spouses where their spouse will kind of check somebody and say, you have been so irritable for the last 5 days in a row. Like, what's going on? What can we do to help? What do you need? How can we get you to a better place? And I think so many times it's hard for us to see that in the moment, right? We're just pounding through and banging our head against the wall and trying to persevere and get to the next thing. And I think that's incredible that you have a business sponsor, a person who's in charge of your well-being as you're an entrepreneur. I think that's incredible. All right, one of the things that I know that's really important to you and many other members in our community as well is faith. For many, it's a higher power, but for others, it's faith in just each other, humanity, spirituality, that feeds the hope that we need in order to survive. You had a great quote in one of your books, which I absolutely love. You said, if hope is the spark, then faith is the fire. Talk a little bit about how faith has kept you going on your journey and how faith can be applied in different ways to help us survive as entrepreneurs.
Aaron, there's two types of faith. There's that faith that is aligned or aligned with spiritual beliefs, but there's also faith in yourself and even faith in others. But my faith began really when I was struggling with my mental and emotional health. When I was hospitalized, I would take my Bible with me. And even though my thinking wasn't always right, so to speak, I was still asking for help. I would pray. I would call my pastor, right? The pastor that confirmed me. I call him at 3 o'clock in the morning, not understanding it's 3 o'clock in the morning, but didn't know I need to talk to somebody. But just knowing that there's something, and we talk about God, right? I think for me, I use the term God because that's a convenient word to use. I can't really define what God is. I believe that God is infinite, and I believe that God has the ability to do things that are far beyond our imaginations. But with that belief, I believe that we're able to do great things. And I know from my own life, without that belief, I don't think I'd be where I'm at today. Because with that faith, I've been able to take risks. Every job I've had, everything I've ever done, including starting on this venture as an entrepreneur, has been done on faith. And I'll tell you something, it's scary to go out there on that limb and take that leap of faith. But honestly, I've never failed. And even when things seem like they were going right, there's always something that happened to kind of make things, go in the right direction. And also I believe that my God, at least that I believe in, works through people. And in fact, the people that have been put in my life are the ones who guide me. And so I hear that message through them. I mean, I've never seen the burning bush, right? I've never seen the clouds part and lightning strike and whatever, and speak to me. But I do believe that God is present in my life. But like I said too, I've learned to have faith in myself in terms of knowing, what my assets are, what my liabilities are, and that's what I got in my 12-step program. We have a 4th step where we describe. We made a searching for more inventory of ourselves. And through that inventory, I really, you take an unflinching look at yourself, you get honest, and you put it on a paper, those areas where you need to work on, also the areas that you're good at.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the idea of faith is essential, at least in my life, and I know in many other people's lives, because sometimes you're at that end of the rope and you don't know what else to do. And as the old saying goes, it takes you to your knees, and you just ask for help. And I know for many people, they get that response. Now, sometimes people don't get what they ask for. And I think like the old Stone song says, you don't get what you want, you get what you need, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I think that's been the case. I mean, I could sit here all day and ask for this and ask for that. Doesn't mean I'm going to get it, but I've always gotten what I needed.
Mm-hmm.
And so now during this COVID experience, I feel so importantly, my main wish, and I said actually to my business sponsor, I said when this all started, I said, I just want to get through this thing healthy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's all, me and my family, that's all I want. Just get through it healthy. Everything else will fall into place.
Mm-hmm.
And so far, in fact, I had a COVID scare a couple weeks ago. I was exposed to someone. And I did a lot of praying because my wife is immunocompromised.
Mm-hmm.
And we got through it okay. But, and I saw something, it just is along the lines of just keep the faith, right? And so I did that. And then when I think about other people, putting faith in other people, trusting other people,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I know that sometimes it's hard to come by because, sometimes you feel you can't trust other folks.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where we use our judgment. We use our discernment.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're not going to have everyone be someone you confide in
Mm-hmm.
about things. But if you have a really close relationship with someone where you can open up, that's invaluable. And so you put the faith in that person, and many times that person will reciprocate by saying, I believe in you.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a coach. Her name is Sabrina. And I started working with Sabrina back in July. And I'll tell you something, she has been probably the best thing that's ever happened. I mean, I just started this thing, but she's been the best thing that's happened to my business. I've learned so much from her. She is such a wealth of knowledge. And all along the way, she's had faith in me.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell. She's never said it. She never said, "Oh, Karl, I have faith in you." She never said it, but you can tell, because she gives me encouragement. She affirms decisions that I make. She guides me, but she believes in me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she wouldn't be investing the time that she does. I know I pay her, but still, I mean, coaches, you don't have to take someone as a client, but she agreed to with what my vision is. And she said, I can help you with that. So the idea of faith, there's many different definitions and ways to look at it, but the way I see it, I think faith for me is something that I can't get by without it. It's essential. And I hope to always feel this way. And I'm sure I will as life goes on, as I continue to learn life's lessons.
Yeah. You're starting to paint this incredible picture for all of us of the team you've assembled around yourself as an entrepreneur. You have a therapist, you have a coach, you have a business sponsor, you have a 25-year standing friend music group that you're close to, you have family relationships in addition to that. That's incredible, right? As an entrepreneur, Karl's not alone. Like you've got this huge team. It's amazing. I think so many of us feel alone, and so many of us haven't been nearly as intentional as you have in building that tribe around you and that team around yourself, not just your business, but specifically yourself. Your own journey with addiction has given you this familiarity with the 12 steps to recover, and you mentioned some of those steps so far, and the workshop and book you've created called Leadership Through the 12 Steps. You've applied those steps in a very relatable way to leadership. You're also very dedicated to the idea of servant leadership, which you and I have talked about, and this idea that we become the best version of ourselves when we're helping others. What can the 12 steps teach us about how we can approach living our lives? Like, how can the idea of servant leadership ultimately lead us to greater success?
Okay, I'm going to give you another, I think the term is Axiom. I think that's the term from NA, which is the 12-step program that I belong to. It says, we only keep what we have by giving it away. We only keep what we have by giving it away. So the way I look at it, if I'm going to keep my skills, my knowledge, my understanding of whatever I want to keep, I need to give it to others and I need to share it with others. I can't keep it to myself. That's a huge disservice. And having been a professional in the work world now for 28 years, working all kinds of jobs, and I've moved around a lot. I was one of those people that every few years people say, so where are you working now? Right? But I've had the privilege of working, as a frontline worker. I've been an administrator. I've done all kinds of things. But when it comes to the idea of this 12-step concept and servant leadership, I believe that the best leader is the one who is able to be an example to others, but also the one who can roll their sleeves up and get into the trenches and say, let's work together. One of the best relationships I had in that respect in jobs I've had was when I worked at Buffalo State College. And I had a boss, his name was Bill Hirsch. And Bill was the Associate Vice President for Enrollment Management. And he actually wasn't too much older than I was. He was maybe a few years older, but he always seemed like he was so much older because he was more seasoned and more of a veteran. And Bill, though, even though he was my boss, I never really felt that way because we would work together on things. We'd work together on projects. Mm-hmm. I remember literally sitting down with him, at a table, going over articulation agreements. Those are the things that you talk about, with schools, with agreements, how students transfer back. If I was a transfer coordinator, so you talk about credits transferring. So we would sit down together and hammer out these articulation agreements with other colleges. And so that taught me a lot about the relationships we have with people who work for us. And how meaningful it is to have these relationships so you can, it's a matter of morale. It's a matter of understanding your employees so they feel like they're supported. Mm-hmm. And I know for the idea of servant leadership, it's crucial. I think if you are autocratic in your leadership style, that do what I say, not as I do, it falls apart. People are going to start not just questioning you, but rebelling. They're going to leave. They're going to talk behind your back, all kinds of things. I think we see this all around us. I'll just leave it at that. But the idea of being a good leader is really where you find a sense of cooperation. Mm-hmm. Right? And so in the book I wrote, I talk about the idea even of equating. So in the book, just so folks know, really all I do is I equate the principles found in 12-step programs with those found in leadership. So for instance, in step 1, I talk about honesty. Step 2 is open-mindedness. Step 3 is willingness, and so forth. Step 12 talks about selflessness and unconditional love. And so you might say, well, what does unconditional love have to do with leadership? Well, it has a lot to do with leadership. Mm-hmm. If you're able to show unconditional love to someone who's on your staff, that means you're willing to look beyond maybe some of the faults they have, because we all have faults, and recognize where their strengths are. Recognize that they're human, and for lack of a better term, give them a little slack. Mm-hmm. for those times that things may not go the right way, but also hold them accountable. I mean, it's not giving a free pass. But unconditional love means that you're not placing expectations and terms on people that are unreasonable. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of things to look at there in that respect.
Yeah, that bravery we talked about earlier, that incredible bravery you had to share some of these challenges with the world, that becomes the teaching component of this, is my understanding, eventually over time, right, where you're helping and mentoring other people. Mm-hmm. What has that, help us understand that for those of us that have not been brave enough to, bear some of these challenges with the world yet. Tell us about what you got in return eventually. What came back to you from being open about your struggles with mental health, with addiction, and then the process of recovery, sharing that with the world? Like, may not have felt great in the moment, right? Maybe it did, but tell us about that. What did you get in return eventually? What's the reward for doing that?
Let me first of all say that I didn't know what I was doing. Honestly, when I wrote that article for the paper, my wife said, first thing my wife said was, don't put our daughter's names in it. Don't mention our family. Don't mention anything, because she was afraid. I didn't know about stigma. Now, mind you, I'm the chair of the Erie County Anti-Stigma Coalition. It's for our county. I mean, it's a regional effort to eliminate stigma. And I'm the chair of this coalition. But back then, I really didn't even know, because I wasn't experiencing it. No one knew about what stigma was. But when I think about how people are looking at the idea of mental health and coming out, so to speak, that's a term that many people use. Certainly, you have to be careful. I think there's a lot of places where you have to keep it maybe closer to the best, as the saying goes. because you don't know what ramifications there might be. I had something to fall back on. Fortunately, I had a career before higher education that I could fall back on that allowed me to go back into it and thereby work in an atmosphere where I didn't have to keep it to myself. And then that's where my career went to from there. Not everybody has that. But in the respect of maybe even open up to friends or other family members, for me, it was a sense of freedom and liberty where I didn't have to walk around hiding, because when you hide things, that creates shame.
Mm-hmm.
And when there's shame, you begin to experience guilt. And it ends up being like a self-fulfilling prophecy, a self-defeating cycle. And so when I opened up about it and it became more part of my life, it just became what it was. And I'll tell you something that was kind of interesting. I had an experience that was remarkable when my daughter was 13, and my older daughter, and I was in my basement running on my treadmill, and she opens up the door and she goes, Dad, are you bipolar? Because we hadn't had that talk yet, right? I said, yeah. She goes, oh, I didn't know that. Because I had there's a magazine I've done some writing for. I've been a blogger for, called BP Magazine. And it had arrived, it was on the table. And it had my name as addressee. So obviously she put two and two together. But even with our own families, to have that conversation and not to be ashamed to talk about it. And I'll tell you something with my daughters, because at first they knew about me being in a 12-step program. They knew about that. But you have those conversations organically. Like I never had to sit down and say, well, Sarah, Lily, this is what I have. No, it just was a very natural thing. And so it became a part of the fabric of our lifestyle in our home. And then it just kind of went from there to my friends and then to the community and the work that I do. But not everybody's going to do it the same way because I have a different type of position. I do different things. But sometimes it's just that matter of just being open with those around you that gives you that sense of empowerment. That, hey, I listen, this is who I am, and take it or leave it. I have my good days, I have my bad days, but you know what? This is it. And if you don't like it, I'm sorry, but this is what I got. So, and you find out who your real friends are. You really do. You find out who your real friends are. And unfortunately, there's some will fall by the wayside. But those that stick with you are the best friends in the world. And I've got some amazing friends. I'm gonna say, like you heard, they talk about social capital. I'm a rich man. I'm a rich man.
That's incredible. This whole founder's first journey for me has been interesting as an entrepreneur who's suffered from anxiety and panic attacks. Like getting up in front of a crowd and giving a speech is like the scariest thing on earth to me. And everything else in a business actually seems quite easy. In 2018, I was asked to come speak to an audience of 70 global CEOs, all entrepreneurs and founders, and at MIT. And I did about a maybe 45, 50-minute presentation where I told some really awkwardly personal stories, but it was a journey to get there and to be able to stand up in front of a room and to be able to share those stories, kind of two things compounding in the challenge for me, both the thing that scares me the most and talking about the thing that I don't want to talk about. But if I think back before that to probably somewhere around 2015, I'm starting to kind of understand better in myself that this is what this stuff is called. These challenges that I've had, when I'm sitting at my desk and I get frustrated and then my heart rate goes to 180 is called panic, and it's called anxiety, and there's processes to manage it. One of the first things I was advised to do was start sharing exactly what we're talking about, sharing with others. And I think it probably took 6 months till I was brave enough to do it. And I was sitting at a bar in Chapel Hill, North Carolina with a friend of mine, having a beer, and I decided and he wasn't even that close of a friend, more of an acquaintance. And I just, for some reason, was like, tonight's the night, I'm going to share it. And so like literally with my hand, like trembling, I share that I'm like struggling with this anxiety disorder and I'm trying to figure out as an entrepreneur. And, at the same time, this person sees me as a very successful entrepreneur. And so I'm trying to navigate, this facade I have of being this, tough, maybe bulletproof, I don't know, entrepreneur that's successful with also how I feel on the inside. And he just kind of looks at me and is a little bit dumbfounded and then changes the subject and never brings it up again. But I remember being kind of devastated in that moment of like, oh God, that did not go the way I wanted it to go. But it was step one. And then step two was I was able to share it with other people. And one thing I realized in that moment was that I put that other person in a really difficult, uncomfortable situation, because most people don't know what to do when someone confides something that raw with them sitting at a bar in public without any heads up on it. And so I took a couple takeaways from that, but one was to was to just keep going. Like even that first attempt that I thought, rainbows were going to come out and the clouds were going to part and I was going to be suddenly healed. It was like awkward and did not go the way I wanted it to go. And then I tried again and I tried again. And then, 3 years later, I'm on a stage talking about these problems. And so I somehow got
That's what happens.
Yeah. So to our guests, if you've got a question you'd like to ask Karl, now's a good time to drop it into the chat section here in Zoom. We'll make sure we get to it. I'm going to ask one more question and then we'll go to your questions. I'll read them out when we get there. So feel free to please drop them in. So Karl, you've had this amazing life experience. You've overcome immense challenges. New chapters are just beginning now for you, being a new entrepreneur starting a business this year in April of 2020. Like what a year where you look back on in 10 years and go, oh my gosh. You've learned so much from your own journey that we can all really draw from to inform our experience as entrepreneurs and just as people. So my last question is, what 3 pieces of advice would you provide to those who are facing struggles and challenges right now that might help them move towards success on their own paths?
I think, well, the first thing I would say is something that someone told me, and actually it kind of ties in with the story I mentioned with the VP for enrollment management about passion. Follow your passion. I didn't even understand that when I heard that years ago, but it really does ring true. Once you find your passion, you get into the flow. And I heard, well, what's that? Once you find your passion and you zero in on it, and it's almost like you have to have blinders on, right? You have to be like that horse with the blinders and stay true to your passion. Then typically things work out. Now, it might mean making adjustments. It might mean stumbling along the way. But I really, really believe that if you're passionate and you put the work in and you're resourceful, creative, then you can be successful. And another thing I would say, the second thing I would say is that we all have good days, we have bad days. And I know for myself, being a new entrepreneur, I mean, just in terms of getting established with contracts and business and getting business coming in, some days it's like, oh my gosh, it's like, when's it going to happen? I need another contract, right? But then again, I know that it's not going to happen every day. There are days that are just kind of just days. So take one day at a time. That's another thing I learned from my program. We talk about an A just for today. A, it's one day at a time, same concept. Don't get caught up in yesterday. Don't worry about tomorrow, get up with that anxiety. Focus on today, what you can do today, and what's within your control. There's a lot of things that are outside of our control in our lives. But what we do have control over is how we react to things and how we respond to things and what we do regards that. And I think the last thing I would say is that, and I kind of mentioned before too, is that don't underestimate your value or where your potential lies. I think so often we don't even think about what we're capable of. So Aaron, you heard a little bit of my story. So in 1981, of course, no, I'll actually say 1988, my very first NA meeting. Mind you, it was 32 years ago. And we have a saying also, I've even thrown a lot of sayings at you, but we have a saying that says, never, beyond our wildest dreams. So in January 17th, 1988, beyond my wildest dreams to ever think I'd be here today, married, 2 successful adult children. And that's my real legacy. That's the thing I'm most proud of, by the way. All this other stuff, it's icing on the cake. My kids are the thing I'm most proud of. But also just the fact that I've got a life, I've got a home, I've got all these things that at one time in life were seemingly impossible for that guy who's catatonic in a dormitory room, who went through electroconvulsive therapy and who was in a major psychiatric center. I mean, so you don't know what you can do until you just try and like I said, believe in yourself. I talked about that before too. So that's what I would say.
It's incredibly inspiring. Karl, thanks so much for being here and sharing your amazing story with us. We're going to take some questions from our members that they'd like to ask. So let's see. First question's from Stephanie. What's the number one thing you recommend for entrepreneurs to support team members who are experiencing mental health challenges? That's a great question. I've experienced that myself among my own executive team. Yeah.
Well, first of all, educate yourself. Okay. Educate yourself. So as I mentioned, I teach mental health first aid. And real briefly, mental health first aid is a program that teaches how to identify the signs and symptoms of mental illness. It teaches how to respond to someone in a mental health crisis. and how to refer them to get help. And it has a 5-step action plan. I taught it yesterday. It's taught virtually now. So try to find, in fact, they do them all over the country, but try to find a mental health first aid course that you can take that will give you the tools to help that staff person, to help that employee that might need to know where to go, and also how to talk to that person. There's good information there too. So, and I've probably done, oh my gosh, close to 140 of these trainings since 2014. I've trained probably, I guess about 1,800 people at least in this program. And I've had such amazing feedback. So I'd say take mental first aid or just educate yourself about mental health, and that's a good first step.
Yeah. I wish I'd done that years ago. We had an incident where I experienced someone around me on my professional team having a manic episode, and it was my first experience with seeing bipolar disorder. And it was absolutely wild as an entrepreneur trying to understand what was happening. Like it took me hours to days and my co-founder for us to understand that there was a mental health issue here. We just thought they were just kind of like weird facts and things that didn't make sense. And we were so confused. And I remember pulling in our HR leader at the time and trying to put together a team to figure out how to do it. And I just so wished I had those skills in the moment to start to understand. And honestly, to even have more compassion in the moment, because I just didn't know what was going on. It made me fearful, not understanding it. Next question's from Justin. So Justin's got a technical question. What do you do when you wake up at 2 or 3 a.m. worried about your business? What do you do to get a good night's sleep? And this is so common among our entrepreneurial community here. We wake up mind racing, or we can't go to sleep, but then we wake up and mind is racing, and we suffer in result of it.
Well, I'll say this. I've been there. It's so funny. And for me, it's like one of those once in a blue moon kind of things. And fortunately, I don't know what it is now, but even through COVID, I've been sleeping pretty well. I've had some periods of anxiety like everybody else, and I've trouble falling asleep. But one trick I have, and a lot of it has to do with focusing and breathing and doing almost like a mini meditation. So one trick I have, and sometimes I do this to fall asleep too, is to breathe in slowly through your nose to a count of 8, and then hold it for 5, and then breathe out for a count of 8, and then do that about 5 times. At the same time you're doing that, repeat a mantra in your mind. And a mantra or a mantra is a phrase that you repeat to keep yourself focused on that thought, as opposed to all the things that are trying to, you're trying to keep track of. If you practice that enough, it may not work the first time, but you keep trying it. Keep trying it. Eventually you do it enough, you'll fall asleep. Believe it or not, it works. I do it sometimes to fall asleep, and it's like I wake up like, it worked. Every time it happens, I'm like, wow, that worked last night, because I don't think I'm able to fall asleep. It works. Another thing I've gotten in the habit of doing, now I'm the kind of person, I'm kind of weird, but I fall asleep sometimes with headphones on. I'm a huge music lover, but I'll put music on, and my wife will keep the TV on, but I'll put music on in my headphones. And I've trained myself, and I've done this for years, to fall asleep with music, and then I just take the headphones off and put them aside. But as far as wake up in the middle of the night, it can be very distressing, especially if it happens several nights in a row. But that idea of the breathing is important, and the progressive relaxation, which you can also do, where you tense your muscles and then you release as you breathe. That's a way of relaxing the body. But essentially, you're training yourself to fall asleep, and that's really what you're doing through this process: train yourself to fall asleep.
Yeah, I've used progressive relaxation really successfully over the years. That's one, just like you were describing, where I'm like, this isn't working. Then I wake up 5 hours later and go, oh my God, it worked this time. Yeah. Someone shared in one of our Peakability sessions recently, this exercise where it's kind of like counting sheep, but it was a little newer and more advanced, I guess, where you imagine like a firework going up in the air, and then when it explodes, there's a 3-digit number, and whatever 3-digit number, you just come up with 3 digits, 1, 4, 5, and then it falls to the ground, and then you imagine another firework going up and exploding, and there's another 3-digit number. And I found that one interesting, maybe just because it was new and used it recently, because there's just, the 3-digit number thing keeps you having to think just a little bit and maybe not get distracted into all those worries and other things that were, causing you trouble in the moment.
But let me just say though, once you find something that works, that's what you do. And typically, if you find that what works, it works, and then you just keep doing it.
All right, next question here. Let's see. Karl, do you find that staying busy with work and interests, family, etc., is critical versus not being active? So not being active meaning letting the mind drift without focus.
I'm not good with inertia and inactivity. I'll be the first to mention it. I get squirrely.
Mhm.
And in fact, it's hard for me just to not do anything. So that's why I try to remain active
Mhm.
in some form or matter. Mind you, I've learned to take time for myself. That's a little bit different. But just to say I'm going to take the day and just do nothing, it's really hard. But that's where the balance comes in. And so the way I look at it, as long as you're not infringing on other responsibilities or taking time away from other responsibilities like family or things you need to do, find your own sweet spot.
Mhm.
But also make sure you take those opportunities to relax and do those things to keep yourself rejuvenated. And so for me, I work. I try to take one day at least to not work,
Mhm.
where I do other things. And I've kind of gotten in the habit of that. I do the shopping for us, for my family, my wife, well, I should say my wife and I. And actually, I like going shopping. I put my earbuds in, walk around the store like no one else is, and I find it to be actually meditative, believe it or not. But yeah, so find that day to kind of just relax and just separate and create those boundaries. But then if you need to work those other days, do what you can do.
Mhm. All right. Next question is from Shelby. Shelby said you spoke a bit about how your tribe and your wife keep you accountable. How specifically, and how do you keep yourself accountable? So those are the relationships. What are the processes or routines within that where you stay accountable?
Well, it's funny. My wife keeps me accountable by essentially being almost like my eyes and ears.
Hmm.
It's so easy to act and be subjective, but she kind of looks at me and is able to call me out if I'm like just this morning. I got up and I must have presented a certain way. She said, "Everything okay?" That's how well she knows me. Oh yeah, it's okay. Because sometimes I wake up on the wrong side of the bed, so to speak.
Hmm.
And so to have someone like that who is really in tune with you, make a difference. Mind you, being married for 26 years doesn't hurt. Knowing each other for 28 years plus doesn't hurt. But then again, with my friends, it's a matter of, like I said, with a sponsor or with other friends, the people who know you enough to call you on your stuff, as I say. I mean, to use it, lack of a better term, or use a different term, who don't allow you just to kind of go off on a rant or a run and just run roughshod over people or do things that might be counterproductive. Because I think we all need that kind of accountability. And then as far as self accountability, that's where I think where this inner compass, inner guide comes in. That focus. That it's like you have to have the goal. And I know for me, I have goals that I want to achieve. And in order to achieve that goal, I have to do certain things. And if they don't get done, then I don't get the goal. It's kind of like that kid that wants dessert. I don't know if you know Pink Floyd The Wall. Of course, I'm dating myself here, but that one line is, you can't get your pudding if you don't eat your meat, right? But that's still so you can't get the reward if you don't put the work in. Right?
Hmm.
So the way I look at it, if I want um, the client or if I want the contract, I have to put the work in for it. But I also have to show up. I have to do the job, and I have to, you know, perform so that I get that next contract from that same person or company.
Yeah.
Reputation.
This power, you brought it up again here, and I think it's an incredible theme for our discussion today. This power of having people that can sort of call you out in a polite way that doesn't derail us or distract us, but puts us back in the right direction. It brings to mind the horrifically tragic, sounds like last couple of weeks to last year of Tony Hsieh's life. For folks that haven't read some of the kind of I don't know, not expose is probably the wrong word, but just some people being interviewed about what his life was like the last 6 months. He relocated from Las Vegas to Park City, paid people to come live with him, like paid friends, doubled their highest salaries to come spend time with him. And the details of the story just continue to get more and more wild. But the singer Jewel, who is a friend of his, sends him a note that's now been published in a lot of these articles. If you've read one, you've probably seen it, saying, Tony everyone's lying to you. Like everyone around you is not calling you out on your bad behavior. You have a bunch of friends and people around you that are enabling this bad behavior. And it sounds like, I didn't know him, but this comes out through a lot of second and third hand reporting now, that he was surrounded by people that weren't calling him out. And unfortunately, it was perpetuating a lot of that behavior. And that just, again, a tragic reminder of what happens when we don't have people around us that we respect, who can call us out to make behavior change in the moment when we need it. Karl, thank you once again for your time and for your amazing work. We are so grateful for your insights today.
I appreciate it, Aaron. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for being on. I hope you have a wonderful holiday season. Stay safe, wear your mask. We want to get through this thing together. So thanks.
Absolutely. This wraps us up for the year. Yeah, we're going to have all a great 2021 as entrepreneurs, I'm sure. So thanks so much, everyone. See you next time. See you in January.